Welcome to episode 199 of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Myers, screenwriter and blogger over at sellingyourscreenplay.com. Today I'm interviewing director-producer Scott Waugh. He recently did a film called Six Below, Miracle on the Mountain. We dig into this project and also how, as a producer and director, he finds projects like this to produce. So stay tuned for that interview. If you find this episode valuable, please help me out by giving me a review in iTunes or leaving a comment on YouTube or retweeting the podcast on Twitter or liking it on Facebook. These social media shares really do help spread word about the podcast, so they're very much appreciated. Any websites or links that I mention in the podcast can be found on my blog in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcasts, and then just look for episode number 199. If you want my free guide, How to Sell a Screenplay in 5 Weeks, you can pick that up by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. It's completely free. You just put in your email address and I'll send you a new lesson once per week for 5 weeks, along with a bunch of bonus lessons. I teach the whole process of how to sell a screenplay in that guide. I'll teach you how to write a professional logline inquiry letter and how to find agents, managers, and producers who are looking for material. Really is everything you need to know to sell your screenplay. Just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. So a couple of quick words about what I'm working on. A quick update on The Pinch, the crime action thriller feature film that I'm finishing up. I am making some good progress. I launched the first trailer last week. I launched the second trailer this week. It's a little longer and a little more polished, so if you're curious to see that, I will link to it in the show notes. Also, my dialogue editor has finished up his portion, so I'm going to be picking up his hard drives and bringing them to the sound mixer, hopefully today or tomorrow, which is really the final stage of audio, is basically the sound mix. So it definitely feels like the home stretch now. My mixer thinks he can do his portion in about a month, so hopefully I'll have this thing done in the next 4 to 6 weeks. Once he mixes the sound, I basically just bring it back to my editor. We drop the thing into the timeline, and then we just start outputting the different versions of the film. So it should be a fairly straightforward process. There was a couple of glitches when my colorist output the file. There was a couple of glitches that need to be redone, but again, we're just at the very home stretch here now, I think. And as I said, I'm really going to be pushing to get this thing done here in the next 4 to 6 weeks. I've already started to ramp up on the marketing side. I'm going to be sending some emails to distributors this week and probably start to submit to some festivals as well. So now I'll start to see how things, how this thing is going to be received by the world. And to me, that's really the most exciting part of it. I mean, it's been a lot of work. And it's just, bringing it all together. It just feels, it's just been such a long process. It's hard to be like super excited. It feels more just like, running a marathon. You're happy to be finished, but the biggest emotion is just this sense of, just finishing up and moving on. So that's good. Again, I just want to mention the webinar I did a couple of months ago about The Pinch. It's called The Pinch, Producing a Micro-Budget Feature Film. I go into great detail on exactly how I wrote, directed, and produced this micro-budget film. Specifically, I talk about how to write a micro-budget screenplay, how to raise money to shoot your micro-budget screenplay, which includes a lot of information about how to run a successful Kickstarter campaign, which I did for The Pinch. And then I also dig into pre-production, production, and of course, post-production. The webinar is over 3 hours long, so there's a ton of information in it. I worked hard to put this webinar together, so I am charging a small fee to view it. But if you're looking to write, direct, and or produce a micro-budget film, I think this could really help you. There are a ton of directors and producers out there looking for the next great micro-budget script. So even if you're just a writer who's looking to understand this market better, I think this webinar could be very valuable to you as well. I think writing scripts that can be shot on a micro-budget level is a great way to meet up-and-coming directors and producers and get some produced writing credits. You can find this webinar at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/thepinch, and the word The Pinch is all lowercase and all one word. And of course, I will link to it as well in the show notes. On the writing front, I finished the kids' TV pilot script. I've been talking about this for the last month or so. I finished that a few weeks ago, and now I am starting to work on episode number 2. The producer is trying to raise the money to shoot the first 6 episodes, which will kind of be like a limited run first season. So while he's getting the logistics figured out, I'm starting to churn out these episodes. It's actually been a very fun project to work on. It's really unlike anything I've ever done. I've never written anything for kids. It's fairly easy to write. The scripts, are that 20 to 30 page, so around 24, 25 pages. And I would say it's taking me about 30 hours to write one episode. So, not too bad. The comedy is broad. It's kids and animals. So as long as I keep it family friendly, I can make it really as crazy and silly as I want. I have two kids as well, a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old. So, I watch a lot of these shows now. So I feel pretty well versed in sort of what sort of comedy works for kids and what they find funny. The big limitation with this project is going to be budget. Since it's very speculative to do a show like this, basically where the producer is trying to produce it first and then sell it, there's constant pressure to keep things simple and cheap and basically keep the budget as low as possible. Because as I said, this is very, very speculative. So that's been the biggest challenge with the pilot episode. The producers read it and everybody seemed to like it, but that was sort of the biggest note is, for the budget they have, will they be able to shoot it? So I'm sure I'm going to have to go back into that pilot episode, probably do a lot of cutting, condensing, trying to make things simpler. With this second episode, now that I've kind of had some meetings with the producers and kind of gotten a feel for sort of where they're going, I'm trying to keep this second episode super, super simple, only a handful of sets, and just keep it so that they can shoot it on the budget that they have. Going through something like The Pinch was a great it was a great experience for a writer, because since I also produce that, I have a much better understanding of sort of what things are costly, what things are difficult to shoot. And so I think all of that is as well helping me write this. But that's really going to be the biggest challenge, is can we shoot the scripts that I've written on the budget we have. The idea that I came up with probably does not lend itself to super cheap. As I said, it's animals, and that can be somewhat challenging. A lot of takes oftentimes. It's not always easy to get animals to do exactly what you want, but that's sort of inherent to the premise, because the actor that they have is an animal trainer. So that's sort of wrapped in. There's no getting around that. And this animal trainer has all the animals. So that's sort of a big piece of it. But that's definitely going to take some time. So it's really just a matter of coming up with a story that's interesting, fun, makes kids laugh, but still adheres to the budget. Anyway, that's what I'm working on. So now let's get into the main segment. Today I'm interviewing director and producer Scott Waugh. Here is the interview. Welcome, Scott, to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show with me today.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
So to start out, maybe you can give us a little overview of your background. Where did you grow up and how did you get interested in the entertainment business?
Well, I grew up in Los Angeles. My father was the original Spider-Man in the TV show in 1976. So I was a on-set child my whole life, and I started doing stunt work when I was 12, and did stunts for about 25 years.
Wow.
And I went to college, studied camera, studied acting, got my degree in fine arts acting, and I always knew I wanted to be a director and thought I better know the craft of acting if I want to be a good director. So I did get my degree in that, came to LA and started producing my first features in 97. And that's kind of taken me all the way to here now. So it looks like, hate to say it, but it looks like I'm going on my 20th year.
No, I hear it. The years go by quick. So let's dig into Let's dig into Six Below, Miracle on the Mountain, starring Josh Hartnett and Mira Sorvino. Maybe to start out, you can just give us a quick pitch or log line for this film.
Well, the pitch on it has always been that it was a crystal meth addict snowboarder that got lost in Mammoth Mountain in 2004. And it's a true story, and the book was sent to me. And it's about his survival on those 8 days on the mountain. And when they pitched it to me, it was kind of crazy because they were like, he falls in a river and gets, completely wet. It's all below 0 temperatures, and wolves come after him and all this crazy stuff. And he ends up losing both legs and having to eat his own skin to get out.
Oh my
and I was like, wow, that's a crazy story.
Mm-hmm.
So they sent me the book, and I look at the bottom of the title, and it says The True Story of Eric Lamarck. And I was like, Eric Lamarck? And I ran out to my assistant, and I said, did Eric Lamarck play hockey? And he said, yeah, he played for the Boston Bruins. And I was like, oh, my God, show me a picture. So he shows me a picture, and I look at this guy, and I'm like, oh, my God, I played hockey with this guy for 6 years when I was a kid, and his dad was my coach. And I always wondered what happened to him. So I was like, I mean, they originally sent me the book to produce it and turn it into a movie, but once I found out it was one of my childhood friends, I was like, man, I got to direct this. This is incredible.
Yeah, no kidding. So let me just touch on something you just mentioned. You said that somebody sent you this book. I just want to touch on how, as a producer, how does material typically flow to you? Was the person who sent this book a colleague or a friend? Do people just pitch you cold queries? They send you emails? Maybe just talk about how sort of material like Six Below just filters through sort of your sphere.
Well, the traditional sphere is through my agent, Mike Asola, and then those that know me and have relationships with me, they usually just, kind of direct route, email it, or just give me a call and say, hey, man, I got this book. And that's kind of how Six Below was. A friend of mine that was, an up-and-coming producer wanted to turn this into a movie, and he sent it to me, and that's kind of how it all started, unbeknownst to him that I knew him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So how did you ultimately find a writer? So you optioned the book, and then do you have a number of writers you've worked with in the past? Maybe you can talk about that process of finding the right writer to turn this book into a screenplay.
Well, this one's kind of funny because right place, right time. My assistant at the time wanted to be a writer and had been really working on it. And when this whole thing was spinning up, I was actually on prep for another film, and he asked me if I would give him a shot. And he goes, let me just write the first 20 pages. And if you like it, great. If you don't, throw it out and we'll find somebody else. And I had nothing to lose. I was like, yeah, man, go ahead. Write the first 20 pages. So he wrote the first 20 pages, and I gave him a read, and they were great. I was like, well, hell, keep on going. And that's it, Madison Turner. Man, it's his first screenplay that's been produced, and now he's no longer my assistant. He's a writer.
And had you read something that he had written before this so that you at least had some confidence that he might be able to pull it off?
Yes, I have. He had a spec script that he had written that I had read before, and he did a lot of treatment writing for myself.
I see. And I just want to ask, there's a lot of people that writers, they get these jobs as assistants to producers or even on TV in features. And maybe you can talk about that protocol for how he approached you. Like, what is appropriate for an assistant or somebody working in that capacity to talk to their boss and say, hey, I'm a writer and I have a script. Would you like to read it? Maybe you can just talk about sort of that relationship and what you feel is appropriate, and maybe even some things that you feel is kind of inappropriate.
Well, I think, to be aware of somebody's time is always really a concern. And, look, I think being cordial always helps. And I think the mere fact that he didn't want to waste too much time, which was, give me a shot at writing the whole script. It was, let me just write the first act and see if you like that. And that, I think, and I'll do it for free. And I just want to show you that I can do this. And I love that tenacity in people, that really want to try and show you. And I mean, look, there's no harm, no foul. It doesn't cost the producer any money, and it gives this person a shot. And if it's good, I don't think a producer's going to pass it up because he's not an established writer. If the writing's good, the writing's good. That's all that really matters.
Yeah. Had he done this before? Like, had he written some other scripts basically for free on spec for you and your company? Or was this the first one? And has he done this subsequently after this one?
This was his first one, and he did write another spec script after this, but now I think he is actually getting paid to write.
I see. Yeah. So let's talk about the development process a little bit. Maybe you can just talk about how that process went. So he's cooking up this first draft. You're reading it. What tools do you guys use? Do you guys get in meetings? Do you read the script? You get in meetings? Do you do it over Skype? Do you do it via email? Maybe just talk through just the logistics of that development process, and then maybe we can even get into some of the actual specifics of what development notes you gave him.
Well, I think, with myself, I always really try to get in the room with the writer and really hash out some of my notes, in certain sections. I think with Madison and how I always work is I don't like to work in micro notes off the bat unless the script is just singing and there's only a few tweaks. But I do find that normally when I come onto a project, I'm kind of working at the macro level. Mm-hmm. So I'll give I like to not pinhole creativity. I want the writer to be able to kind of take a note and run with it. So I'll always give very broad macro notes of, what if this character didn't do this, that, or what if we got rid of one character entirely? Those kinds of notes that are really broad that I think, will help the material, but, I think that it really lets the writer still be really creative, take the note and run with it. And that's kind of how we were on Six Below in the beginning.
Yeah. Maybe you can just speak a little bit on raising the money. You have a draft of the script done. What were your next steps then about going out and actually trying to get this thing into production? And ultimately, that means just raising the money.
Well, I've been very fortunate to kind of have made a bunch of films now, so I kind of have a great through line to financiers and studios, and I definitely wanted to do this on the independent side. I just wanted full creative freedom, so I partnered with a technology company, Barco Escape, and then Tucker Tooley, who I have a relationship with from Mac to Valor. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of pretty easy. Honestly, because I wanted to keep the budget down because I'm a producer on it as well, so I wanted to be financially responsible.
And how much, maybe talk about the logistics of Josh Hartnett and Mira Sorvino. How much were they on before you got the financing, or did they come on after?
They came on kind of simultaneously. I was after with Tucker. He was procuring it and the financing on his side, and I told him I was going to go after Hartnett, and he totally approved it, and then he really helped me get after Mira Sorvino. So it was kind of a tag, and I've always been a Hartnett fan, so I was super excited to, go out to Josh with this.
Yeah, perfect. How can people see Six Below? Do you know what the release schedule is going to be?
Yeah, the release is next week.
Is that right?
It's October. Yeah, it's October. We have a Fathom release, theatrically, 500 screens across the United States on October 12th at 7 p.m. It's one night, one screen. And you can go to fathomevents.com, type in your zip code, and it'll tell you the closest theater to you.
Okay.
And then on October 13th, we have our day and date release. So it'll be in 10 theaters, kind of spread out across America, and also on premium downloads, pay-per-view, etc., and then physicals at the end of November.
Yep, perfect. So what's the best way for people to keep up with what you're doing? Anything you're comfortable sharing, a Twitter handle, Facebook page, blog? Is there anything you actively use in terms of social media just for kind of putting out your work and letting people know what you're up to?
Well, the only social channel I use is Instagram, and it's Action for Life. That's my handle on Instagram, and it kind of gives people a kind of peek at where I'm at and what I'm doing.
Okay, perfect. I will round that up and I will put that in the show notes so people can click over to it. Scott, I really appreciate your time and coming to talking with me. Good luck with this film.
Awesome, my friend. Thank you so much.
A quick plug for the SYS Screenwriting Analysis Service. It's a really economical way to get a high-quality professional evaluation on your screenplay. When you buy our 3-pack, you get evaluations at just $67 per script for feature films and just $55 for teleplays. All the readers have professional experience reading for studios, production companies, contests, and agencies. You can read a short bio on each reader on our website. You can pick the reader who you think is the best fit for your script. Turnaround time is usually just a few days, but rarely more than a week. The readers will evaluate your script on 6 key factors: concept, characters, structure, marketability, tone, and overall craft, which includes formatting, spelling, and grammar. Every script will get a grade of pass, consider, or recommend, which should help you roughly understand where your script might rank if you were to submit it to a production company or agency. We can provide an analysis on features or television scripts. We also do proofreading without any analysis. We will also look at a treatment or outline and give you the same analysis on it. So if you're looking to vet some of your project ideas, this is a great way to do it. We will also write a logline and synopsis for you. You can add this logline synopsis service to an analysis, or you can simply purchase that as a standalone product. As a bonus, if your script gets a recommend from a reader, you get a free email and fax blast to my list of industry contacts. This is the exact same blast service I use myself to promote my own scripts, and it's the same service I sell on the website. It's a great way to get your script into the hands of producers who are looking for material. So if you want a professional evaluation of your screenplay at a very reasonable price, check out www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/consultants. In the next episode of the podcast, I'm going to be interviewing producer Dana Lustig. She has been producing for years and just did a movie with Daniel Radcliffe called Jungle. So we talk about that film as well as how she got her start in the business and how she currently finds scripts to produce. So keep an eye out for that episode next week. To wrap things up, I just want to touch on a few things from today's interview with Scott. I love the story Scott told about the screenwriter on this film, Madison Turner. He saw an opportunity and he put himself out there. He offered to write the first act for free. He wasn't asking Scott to read a full screenplay, just one act, and he made it clear that if Scott didn't like it, he could toss it away without a problem. Scott wanted to make this movie. He was already invested. You heard him tell the story about how he knew this guy from previously, the main guy that the book was about. So Scott was invested. Scott wanted to make this film. So, you know, when Madison comes along and makes this offer, it's really a perfect fit. I mean, what producer isn't going to accept this offer? Scott had to hire a screenwriter. So Madison shows up, says, hey, give me a shot at it. I'll write the first 20, 30 pages and I'll do it for free. I mean, what producer is not going to jump at that? It's saving Scott time. It's helping Scott out. From Scott's perspective, this is a no-lose situation. It's a potential win-win. It's a win for Scott and it's a win for Madison as the writer. And that's exactly what you want to create for producers. You want to create these no-lose situations so there is no reason for them to turn you down. And just take a step back and really think about this for a minute. When you send a query letter or a pitch or any kind of approaching a producer that you don't necessarily have a relationship with, you're asking them to help you out. You're asking them for a favor. They don't know you, and now you want them to take several hours out of their day and read your full screenplay, a screenplay which most likely isn't going to be something they like or something they can do anything with. So really think about that. You know, sending out queries, it can work, but you're basically asking the producer for a favor. Hey, you don't know me. You know, my script may or may not be something you can actually use, but would you check it out? And, you know, some producers are in the market for scripts. Some producers are open to that. But it's a better strategy if you can figure out ways to create these sorts of win-win, no-lose situations for producers. Now, there's a couple of parts to what Madison did for Scott, so I do want to just touch on those very briefly. First, obviously, Madison had to be in L.A., so if you're not in L.A., you've got to get to L.A., you've got to find that low-level job at a production company. This is sometimes easier said than done. I've talked a lot about this on my podcast. There's a variety of ways of doing that. You can do temp work. There are temp services in LA that specialize in doing temp work to production companies or entertainment companies. So that's a great way. I'm not sure of the podcast number, but Eric Bork did a podcast episode with me. And he did exactly that. And he goes through exactly sort of his the way he went about doing it. So I would say check that one out. I'll round it up and I'll put that in the show notes if you want to listen to a real concrete nuts and bolts story about how one person made this work. You can check that out. The other part of this is that this film is not necessarily a huge studio film, so it's unlikely to get a ton of attention. So just having one credit like this, and I can speak from experience on this, isn't going to necessarily make Madison's career just take off. There's still a lot more work for him to do. It sounds like he's in a great position to do it, and it sounds like he's a hustler, so I'm sure he'll be able to take advantage of any heat he gets from this project. But be prepared for that too. One credit does not make a screenwriting career. You're going to have to put yourself out there over and over again. You're going to have to take chances. You're probably going to have to write some material for free. And, you know, we'd have to talk to Madison about this, but, you know, there's a good chance. I've done some of these in my career where I've written stuff for free and it doesn't work out. So as a screenwriter, you're constantly putting yourself out there, and things don't always turn out the way they do for Madison in this particular case. And as I said, if we were to talk to Madison, I would say there's a good chance he might have tried things before that didn't work out. He might have written 50 scripts for free for producers, and this is the one that finally actually did take off. So just keep that in mind. I mean, you're looking at sort of the one that worked here because there's a produced film, but realize that you may go through this several times, and that's part of the process. I'm not saying that to discourage you or to tell you not to do it. I'm telling you that's part of the process. You're most likely going to write scripts for free for producers, and they're not going to get produced, and you're going to be back to square one. You're going to have to take a step back, and you're going to have to do it again. And even after this credit for Madison, there's a good chance he's still going to have to write some free stuff and continue to hustle and continue to get his stuff out there. There's no free lunch and there's no coasting. So just kind of understand that going into this. And the reason why I think it's important to understand it, I'm not trying to be negative. The reason I think it's important to understand it is because, you know, that's part of the process. And if you understand that going into it, you won't be discouraged when it happens. You know, this is part of the process. Madison is building relationships with guys like Scott, and Scott is a real director and a real producer and someone who's actually making movies. And so now they have an even stronger relationship. And, you know, maybe it'll be 5 years down the road. Maybe Scott will look back to Madison to write another script. You just don't know how these relationships are going to work out. But that's really, really the key to any of these things is, you know, building these relationships with, you know, other smart, talented people in the business that are making movies and partnering with them and getting to know them. And that's really the most important thing. I think probably the most important lesson that you could take away from this is that, you know, Madison now has a really good ally in Scott, and Scott probably is going to keep an eye out for other opportunities for Madison, and hopefully Madison is pursuing other producers and trying to meet other people and get an agent and get a manager and move other things, you know, away from Scott. He's trying to, you know, push his career in other directions as well. Because certainly you don't want to rely on just one person or one producer or one director, for your own career. Anyway, that's the show. Thank you for listening.